All right. Welcome, everybody, to this month's episode of the User Dev Meeting. We'll go ahead and get started. And today we're talking about the Power Users feedback as we did last month. This will be a continuation of that discussion. And this month we'll be focusing on autoscaler feedback as well as file system feedback. So Dan, take it away.
Thanks. Good morning. I will share the screen. This should be the doc. And great, I see Junior's here. Thanks. So last week or last month we went through a few topics, everything that has a check mark in this document, and maybe I'll throw the link in the chat again. If it's not, it's probably linked also from those minutes. But we went through a few topics like upmap balancer, some OSD issues, RGW tuning, and afterwards, actually, Laura and I, thanks very much, Laura, we went through and created we did some bit of triage, created some new issues, documentation things, different ideas that we had collected, during that meeting. So we'll aim to do something similar this time. And this time we went through the list together of the topics that we didn't cover and thought that today would be a good day to go through let's say PG auto scaling, for which there was a lot of feedback in the power users sessions at Cephalocon. And then also if we have, there's Venki. Hey, Venki. Good afternoon, good evening. We could also go through CephFS, some CephFS feedback as well. So maybe, thanks again for joining, Junior. So maybe just to get started, I would say perhaps we can introduce just go over the feedback here, and then maybe Junior, you can maybe respond with some ideas. I'm sure it's been more than 6 months since this feedback, and we're just freezing tentacle almost on the RC now, and maybe we could hear from you what are the plans or any changes that are ongoing, and maybe together think about how any concrete actions that can come out of it. So does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Great. Okay. So this is some kind of ChatGPT summarized version of the notes. Okay. So it's not that extensive, but having gone through this, I can elaborate on some of these points. But the points that were noted in those power user sessions, number one, there was kind of the concept that a lot of the flags were unclear. A lot of the configuration and tunables for the PG autoscaler is a little bit difficult to digest. So that was kind of call it usability or so, ease of use, right? It's too early to spell things correctly for me here in Vancouver. Second thing was maybe about just the default behaviors on the way that it has heuristics with bias and things like that for different types of applications. So, and specifically users were calling out that often the number of PGs assigned to metadata pools and for CephFS and index pools for RGW is too low according to what power users were expecting. So in particular, I know that the defaults, I think there's a ratio of there's a bias of 4, something like that. For those kind of index pools, and that's often not really enough. I think power users like to see, let's say, index pools should have something it depends on the scenario, but maybe 5 or 10 PGs per OSD instead as a different heuristic. So it's really about, the number being too small. So, e.g., 5 to 10 PGs per OSD for index or MD pools. There's a comment about it says not topology aware. I think I'm not sure exactly what that is referring to. We know that there's limitations with regards to like if you have overlapping roots, I think like that. Is this the overlapping roots problem? Is this the over? Like, not sure. So we can probably look back to the notes to find out what this was referring to. And prior versions had unstable PG counts. We'll have to look back and see what that is. But I think probably the idea there is maybe that it's just when changing the PGs, sometimes it was unstable or something like that. I mean, maybe someone knows more about what that might have been. And then we had some like there were some concrete ideas like improving the usability. There was a specific PR that was to be looked at, and like improve basically the guidance on PGs per OSD. So that's the kind of summary of the notes from those sessions. Do you want to chime in, Junior?
Yeah, sure. I think in terms of bias and expected ratio, I think in the documentation for upstream of these, I don't think it's super clear. You don't actually see like how it's calculated. But essentially bias is just that, you're multiplying it against the basically what PG autoscaler calculates to be like the target PG for each pool based on the capacity, basically how much the pool is using, how much data it's using. And I guess, yeah, we could potentially make that more clear in the documentation. In terms of bulk flag, I think there's like a separate section in the documentation. I'll just go over it real quick, but basically what it does is it will, instead of trying to scale each pool based on the capacity ratio, it will try to give it, if the pool has a bulk flag, it will try to give each pool like the max amount of PGs, and then basically that's the OSD number of OSD multiplied by I think I forgot what exactly that value is, but it's basically like PGs per OSDs, like max PGs per OSDs, and then the default value is probably like 100 or something. But yeah, you have that total complement of PGs, and then you go through each pool with the bulk flag. You kind of give it kind of like split it on each pool. So each pool might get like 100 PGs or something. So that kind of like maximize how, when you first start the autoscaler, it's giving each pool like the maximum amount of PGs possible. And the rest of the pools without bulk flag, it will just use the same kind of like heuristics, which is the capacity ratio. Yes, I think that's a question.
Yeah, I think that another valid suggestion would be for the autoscaler to explain how exactly it arrives at the suggestion, at the suggested PG counts.
Okay, so like you mean like in the docs, or are you talking about like if you set like a warning feature on autoscaler before it scales, it tells you like exactly how, like where is it? You mean like in the Ceph?
I mean something like CFPG autoscaler explain, and it gives you a lot of text output for human consumption.
Okay, so it's like a feature, a command in Ceph, and then it explains more
Yes, a built-in
verbosely.
feature of Ceph that explains the decision very verbosely so that a human can read it.
I see. Yeah, I mean that sounds good to me so far initially. Yeah, if that helps, then yeah, sounds like a good idea. Let's see.
So yeah, then maybe about the default, the PG numbers being too low. So let's maybe take this more generally, like, and it's related to that question, like, or that idea, like how it arrives at the value. So like there's there's a built-in heuristic inside there. So do you find that that's like like what kind of feedback do you get? I mean, I know the kind of feedback that we get in the power users is that the numbers are often, you know, maybe too low or you know, not accounting for enough information about the cluster, like number of objects in the pools or things like that as well. So do you have some, is there some kind of like plan to improve that, or like, is it considered kind of done on your side, or?
No, definitely not done, because, you know, recently I have had discussions with people who are using like, you know, other products and stuff. We're using Rook with Ceph, and they basically were complaining that their initial values weren't too large, and they were experimenting with that default value. Let me try to look it up exactly what it's called. Mon-target PG per OSD. That's a default Ceph config value, which is 100. They were trying to, you know, experiment with kind of like if they can make that default value 200, 400, and based on kind of like a t-shirt size of the cluster. So definitely I've had feedbacks where, yeah, the PGs were starting too low. There are many tunables here. Like you can, I did propose that they should use the bulk flag just to start the PGs count to be high for each pool, but they didn't seem to think that that was enough. So therefore they were thinking about, you know, changing that value, one target PG per OSD, the default value, or, you know, at runtime maybe, or even before that. But there, yeah, I've had some feedbacks regarding, yeah.
I think this one. Yeah. So thanks for mentioning that. There is definitely ongoing discussion about increasing the overall target, like to 200, and there's some interesting stuff there that maybe we can get into. Maybe this call, maybe a future one, but I think this comment was about the relative values for metadata pools. So for example, like if you have like a RGW, you know, it has many different pools, but two most important pools are like the data pool, which would normally be bulk. You would set the bulk flag on that, and you have like the bucket index pool, and on that one, you we have like the way that like that one, it's not going to have very much data, but it's important that one performs well, because like having the right number of PGs for that one is essential for good RGW performance. So in this one, the way that the autoscaler handles it, last time I checked, is that it just has a bias of 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it'll always just it ends up, you know, even on a many petabyte cluster, there's still only maybe a few terabytes of data in that pool. So a bias of 4 is usually still not enough. So this is why, like, I think the point of this one is to just like use a totally different heuristic for the metadata pools, and like instead of a bias, do something like count the number of OSDs and make sure that there's something like 5 PGs per OSD or something like that. You see like a completely different.
I see.
I wonder if it might be more useful there to base it on the number of objects rather than the total size, because for index pools, it's the spreading that we care about per object rather than the total
Sure,
amount.
even better. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what would be do you have a good like back of the envelope suggestion for that, Casey?
I do not.
Maybe
I just
look at the
never
logic
understood
for
the bias part.
maybe look at the logic for the auto resharding and do something, you know, linked to that, because they seem like, you know, they're you know, roughly, you know, connected.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk through that. So, you know, we're going to have, I mean, so you're going to have at least 11 shards per bucket, and like a normal cluster here. Here we're talking about clusters that will have, let's say, hundreds of shards, right? So I think, I mean, you want to have at least as many PGs as you have index shards, right? It should never be less than that, I would say, right? And there's going to be some number where the cluster will end up with, like, suppose a cluster had 100,000 index shards. How does that tell you How does that help you know how many PGs you should have? Any ideas? Like if I have a cluster with like 100 OSDs and 100,000 index shards, like that would be a real scenario, right?
I've got a user with a bucket with 144 million objects in it, and the index pool on 4 OSDs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, this way, like in what we usually do, like is just do something like 10, and it's the same for the CephFS metadata pools. Just always just do something like 10 PGs per OSD as a flat number, and it seems to be okay. But I don't know if that's just one data point.
Yeah.
Anyone else have
My overall sense is that, now that file store is not really in the picture, we don't need to be so afraid of PG counts as we used to.
Well, for the bucket index, it's important because the OSDs holding those bucket indexes run the OSD class. They run the RGW class methods, so it actually runs on the OSDs. Like listing it, it's not just getting the data; it's actually doing processing. So that's where it's like the idea is like keep as many OSDs as possible busy doing that. Take advantage of your OSDs.
Yeah, I think Alexander is trying to raise his hand.
Yes, I think that the number of objects and the number of pages is important because when it is going to be increased by the autoscaler, there will be additional load on the cluster. So it's better to overshoot here.
Yeah, and the autoscaler by default won't act until it wants to triple the number. So it really has a way of being short. That's why I have that PR open to raise the target and the guardrail, the max per PG, raise that so that when we raise the target, when something fails or if you have OSDs at different sizes, it doesn't cause inactives.
Yeah, another issue with too small PG count is that, for example, if there was a hardware issue, for example, and then we need to go through the backfilling, then if we have many small PGs, then we can, for example, monitor progress more easily, and backfilling of one PG serves as a useful checkpoint so that if something restarts unexpectedly, it doesn't restart from scratch, but I might be wrong here.
Yeah, one thing that can confound this that I've seen recently, I think, with some of the container products, is that if somebody is overzealous on setting the target ratio for pools, that can kind of confound the bias for the index pool metadata pools.
Yeah. So yeah, Junior, I think that there's some different. We won't solve the heuristic today, but how would you like to receive feedback on? Let's just call it like the internal decision heuristics that the autoscaler is using to decide those PG numbers. I think that there could be a lot of different ideas and points of view on this topic.
Yeah, for this particular pool, index pool, yeah, I'm not too sure. Because you said it kind of depends. Like you gave me an example of when you have petabytes of data and then one pool is using only at 1 terabyte. Although you should have because the capacity ratio won't be that high for that pool if I'm understanding correctly, and therefore the pools the PGs won't be scaled that high. Therefore, you have that, it's just too little. I guess
Yeah.
I guess changing. I mean, I can't think of a really good answer right now, but I guess
Mhm.
like in terms of I like with the Rook people were using ODF and stuff like that. I mean, their idea was to change on-target PGs per OSD based on the cluster size.
Yeah, yeah. I had a discussion with Travis about that not too long ago.
Yeah, and I think that's not such a bad idea. It's just one concern from my and from Rados end is that if you do that for like clusters that is like smaller, then there will be a lot of overhead because OSD will potentially use up more memory, and but obviously I think the ODF people, what they did is that they also increase memory per OSD container on their part. That's how they kind of like um, their strategy on preventing too much use of memory. But yeah, I think maybe that could be one solution. Um,
And
Well,
for context, some of these are Ceph clusters that have 3 OSDs total.
hmm.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I
So
think that.
gets
Yeah.
tough to do the right thing in both the smallest and the largest
Yeah, definitely,
situations.
definitely. I think this. I mean, power users. This is power users feedback, right? So normally that's
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
3 OSD clusters.
But we
That's
we
100
need to make
petabyte
sure that
clusters.
we don't break
Of
the other
course,
end.
of course. Think about it. Maybe just to maybe to understand the problem. But I think what I'm proposing, Junior, is that is like which kind of we should spin off this discussion to is there is there one of the community weekly meetings that is there one of those that we can spin off this discussion to then talk through these ideas in more detail.
Yeah, we can. I mean, in terms of upstream meetings, I
Yeah.
mean, weekly. I mean, the Rados meeting would be, I think, the best. I would say, yeah,
Okay. Okay.
for me at least.
Yeah. I mean, just to like maybe like for those to explain the like another alternative heuristic that just to maybe elucidate the problem. Um, Imagine, okay, so like I wrote the example here. It's like even on very large clusters, like the index pool is normally only something like 32 PGs, which is, and that'll be on a cluster with 2,000 OSDs. So
Mm.
you see, it's like somehow, and something implicit that maybe hasn't been mentioned here is that these clusters are often they're all HDDs with a block DB that's on NVMe. So the index pool is like index data is all OMAP at the moment. And Casey, maybe chime in if that's going to change, but it's all OMAP at the moment. So it fits nicely into those NVMEs on the HD
Mm-hmm.
clusters. So the architecture is very like nice and efficient and low cost. And the unfortunate thing with the current defaults is that even on a very large cluster, like very few of your OSDs will be helping with that CPU work that needs to be done to do the Rados gateway metadata operations. So the insight is to like spread that across, let's say, at least all of your OSDs so that they can all contribute CPU time, because it's not really a IO bandwidth issue or a data storage issue at all. It's more of a CPU time issue. So if somehow the OSDs were tracking counters, like an internal performance counter of how much time that they were spending processing each PG that they're hosting, then that would be another metric that we could use to like spread the load, spread the
Mhm.
CPU load across, load balancing CPUs effectively. Yeah. But that's also, I think that's stuff that we haven't really thought of or discussed before, but
Mm-hmm.
I was just hoping that maybe that's another way to explain what the problem is. Yeah.
Yeah, like kind of inform, the Casey has something to add.
Yeah. Thanks.
One of the reasons why I wanted to raise the target was that if we have like 56, I see 60 PG replicas on an OSD. If we, change our heuristic to bump up with the index pool, then we take even more away from the others. And so, that my, my, regardless of this other very valid stuff, I think if we raise the target to even like 200 or
Yeah.
250, I
Yeah.
think that gives the autoscaler more room to work.
Oh
And
yeah. Yeah.
and thus to, so that maybe, these cases won't be quite as bad. But everything you described is absolutely worth, where it won't have to make as severe trade-offs. But the heuristics, I'm very interested in seeing how that works out as well.
Okay, Casey.
Yeah, just really quick adding on to what you were saying about CPU usage. I assume that you're talking about bucket listing requests, which are reads. But
For example,
I think the PG counts are also important for write parallelism. So just performance of different object uploads to the same bucket, not contending on the bucket index.
Yeah, right. Just a question. Would that? So yeah. So because that's impacted by the number of shards for a bucket to make sure it's on many OSDs, and then that OSD is not busy processing an operation for some other index, right? Is that what you're thinking?
For another index object on the same PG, as long as
Yeah,
they're
from another
different
bucket or
PGs,
something.
then they
Yeah,
can happen in
reduce that.
parallel.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. To reduce, like, also reduce like write contention, right? Yeah. On the indexes.
So then maybe do we want to target 1/3 of the number of OSDs, if I understand Casey correctly, rather than 10 per OSD for the index pool?
No, it
So
should be higher. It should be
okay,
like
I
higher.
thought
No, it's
he was
it's
talking
the
about.
opposite. No, this is the argument that you need more PGs.
Okay, I thought he was saying to
OSD.
not have one OSD running more than one of these at a time. I misunderstood.
That's right, but the way you achieve that is through having more PGs, because
Okay,
kind of
got it.
OSD parallelism.
Got it.
One dimension to OSD parallelism is by increasing the PG count.
Mm-hmm. And so we may have some that are doubled up, but most of them won't be. Okay.
Well, if you had only one PG, like at the limit, you have one PG for the bucket indexes, one OSD is
Which I've seen.
the
Yes.
single bottleneck for all of
Mm-hmm.
this stuff, right? So you increase the PGs. Now you can do 2, increase PGs, like maybe you can do 32, like you can increase it more and more and more. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a customer right now who has 9 PG replicas per OSD.
Yeah.
9.
So yeah, I mean, at the risk of like derailing things too much, like I think about PG autoscaling completely differently. I just want to like kind of throw out the idea. And it kind of builds on what Alexander was saying earlier, where it's like you better get the initial numbers right, because changing them live on a power user's cluster can be a scary or disruptive operation. This is one of those things that was captured. I think that's kind of the like this unstable thing. So the way I was thinking about this is like I mean, we have the PG autoscaler now, which more or less runs in the background and is like constantly kind of tuning things out of the box and adjusting the PG counts. But I was thinking about it that if the UX for it were more like the balancer, where you have like we have Ceph balancer on and off, and you can do like Ceph balancer optimize, and it's like a one-shot mode as well. If we thought about it like that, it might make things, it would change things, and for me it would be an improvement, but I don't know what others would think. So maybe I'm just like, I would like copy it in here just as a kind of like brainstorming thing, and I want to see if people have a kind of like any feedback on that. So let's do Control P. Okay, that kind of got really ugly. Oh, sorry about the spacing. I'll clean it up afterwards. But like, this is the kind of like normal user story for Ceph, right? It's like a user installs Ceph, and this is what I think like a better user story than what we have now would be. Like, you install a new cluster in the OSDs, and the autoscaler is off. There is no autoscaling on. Okay. The user like creates the applications on that cluster, like the file system, the rouse gateway, RBD, like they set up the pools effectively, but that's really like setting up which applications will run there. And then there's some kind of like one-shot thing that happens. A PG autoscaler, like it's just like in one shot, it optimizes the PG counts for the cluster, and then it like switches itself off and doesn't run again. So it's just like an optimized thing that happens at the beginning when you've set up a cluster, and then so it's basically following on from that bulk bulk mode effectively. And then like maybe periodically it can check if things are still like following a recommendation, like the follow, like if they're still optimal, and it would somehow just like give a warning or advise somehow that it wants to make a change, and then that would be opt in. The operator would like opt in, okay, yes, like execute that change that you want to do, because normally on a large cluster that's something that you want to do, you want to plan for. You want to inform the users, or something like that. So yeah, so it's like the way, it's like similar than like writing out the CLI. It's like I said, it's like the balancer CLI. So you would have like Ceph PG calc on and off. Like we have Ceph balancer on and off, and like the one shot thing would be like plan and optimize. That's like the balancer thing. So I've just copied the balancer UI just to explain how I think about this. But I mean, this kind of one shot thing at the beginning and then just going into like advisory mode. What do people think about that? Would
Warn.
that be, yeah?
Yeah, that sounds kind of like what you're saying is to at some point just automatically switch all the pools into warn mode for the autoscaler.
Something like that. That would be the way you implement it with the current thing. Yeah.
I mean, I can think that, yeah, it would be definitely like more stable if like for people who are having stability issues with, as you said, too much PG splitting or merging. I don't know. I think I have to revisit why we have like the autoscaler at the first place. Like, I'm sure like the motivation behind it is that it's like a hands-off thing where
Yeah.
it's just so intelligent, and it just will do the best thing for you, given the amount of OSDs and things like that. So I kind of see that, okay, your solution is definitely going to help the stability, because like we can't lie that right now the autoscaler is not the most stable thing. So kind of have to revisit like the purpose. So yeah, I think yeah, I would love to hear what like a lot of people think as well. Like, what's the purpose of the autoscaler? Is it to, for you to be hands off? Is it for you to just assist you on this, optimization thing in the beginning out of the box, and then later on it's back to you as a user. You have control now,
Yeah.
Well, certainly if you consider, like say an OpenStack back cluster, you have probably going to have at least 2 RBD pools, and you're going to have the usual slew of RGW pools. And, maybe some of them are EC and some of them are replicated. Those of us who've been doing this for a long time can figure out that math to come up with the numbers, but that's very daunting for somebody just coming in new. So, I mean, to me, that's what the autoscaler is for. So the users don't have to understand these really subtle things, especially when they're ramping up. But then the relative data in those will change over time. It's like you start off not using object storage, but then on the next year, boom, your object takes off, and that perturbs the choices you want to make. But then also clusters grow, and clusters do shrink as well sometimes. And I mean, for me, that because if you do it manually, it's real easy to forget to re-examine the numbers when the cluster scales up or down. And so the autoscaler handling that automatically, I think is, yeah, I think those are the 2 points of not having to do the complicated math, and not having to remember to redo it when when the cluster scale changes, and the relative usages of pools change.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think we should move to the CephFS discussion now. But I think there's a lot of good ideas and stuff here, and I just like this this topic of bringing it to the Rados Weekly. Like, let's find a way to do that. Okay, Junior. And then we can get concrete with some ideas and improvements, and we'll advertise when that would happen, and the interested users with ideas can join that. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Great. Okay. Okay. So we'll follow through with information about that when that follow up will happen. Were there any last points about that? I mean, I'm just mindful of the clock that we want to be sure to talk about CephFS. Okay. Last time, so thanks to Venki for joining. Last time, were you here last time?
Asking me then?
Yeah.
No, I wasn't here. I probably joined Ceph Users there quite a while back, so it's been some time.
Awesome. Okay, well, welcome. So last time we had a discussion about like the disaster recovery docs and whatever can be done in order to improve. Like they're really great and complete. This is what we were discussing. Like they're complete. They're excellent, but it's quite complex. So there were a couple of like PRs here that were created. Actually, a couple of trackers, but I see someone has marked this as done. I don't know if that means it's done. I think it means, Laura, this is us saying that we've created a tracker for this, right?
Yeah, if we
But the
bolded
idea,
it.
yeah. So we were hoping, oh yeah. So like just like we noted down together, the group here, we noted down some ideas how to improve the DR docs, like which of the steps can be done, like when, and like can we have some kind of flow chart? Is there anything that's dangerous? Things like that. So that's all kind of just here in this tracker. So do you have any? And oh, Alex, go ahead. You have your hand up there.
Yeah, basically, I am saying that this link, troubleshooting stuck in replay, really belongs to disaster recovery, and my team members often missed it and performed the necessary disaster recovery steps when it was sufficient to reduce the debug.
Sufficient to reduce the debug.
Yeah, instead of reducing the debug, because the documentation, which is not a disaster recovery documentation and therefore is missing when a person is doing disaster recovery. If your MDS is stuck in replay, then it's likely that the journal is very long, blah, 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 reduce debug.
Mm-hmm.
This should be part of the disaster recovery documentation. So basically, pointer to another topic or move the pointer.
I see what you're saying. Okay, stuck in up at replay. Oh, okay.
That's
So
a nice,
let's add that.
yeah, that's a nice pointer. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just add that as another action. Thanks for that one. Yeah. Add this to the DR docs. Okay. Great. That's excellent. Wasn't aware of that one. But like overall, going back to where's the, am I on the right? Am I sharing the right screen still, guys? It's a bit.
User feedback document shared.
Yeah, I'm still sharing this one that I'm highlighting, right? Yeah,
yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so just like, and like in addition, like somehow, Venki, we were looking at the procedure on the standard, advanced metadata recovery page, and just like having a bit more explanation there. I mean, I know because right now it's in the middle state of like here's some commands documented, so like to naive users it looks okay, safe, kind of run those things. But then I think maybe you have experienced, like some of others, that it caused more damage than the original situation that the user was in. So somehow like clean that up and making it more like more explanation about what why it was originally like what the users can do when it's safe and things like that, and automating as much as possible as well. But yeah. Alex, you have your hand up again, or?
Yes, my complaints about all this disaster recovery are twofold. First of all, there is no progress indicator for example, the scanlinks command. And second, it is never documented that this recovery can consume sometimes 1 terabyte of RAM plus swap. So when I ask customers to add swap, oh no, we don't have that right now. Can we somehow sidestep this requirement? So I started for new cluster deployments just demanding that every host with an MDS has at least 1 terabyte of unused SSD. So that if disaster happens, when disaster happens, we can use it as swap.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I just linked a tracker in the chat window. That is precisely Alexander's first point, where we are trying to provide like an estimation completion time for these tools. Like we said, data scan tool can run for long. That scales as many objects you have. So the time is actually exponential of that. So yeah. So this is being worked on. At least the point one is being worked on. And soon we'll have like a estimated completion time for many of these tools, especially the dark scan tools.
Yeah, that's
Cool.
great.
Yeah, I didn't get your second one.
It was about
Alexander.
memory usage. Like
Something
memory
like this will
usage
run.
is memory usage is unpredictable. Sometimes like Scrub can use a lot of memory. I mean, there are a lot of, I think there are quite a few trackers on that kind of issue, and he's keeping like 1 terabyte of NVMe on all MDSs just in case swap is needed. Yeah, there's
This is for
several.
Scrub. This is for online Scrub or the recovery tools.
Both. They have approximately equal memory requirements.
All right, let me check on that.
Yeah, I can share some trackers also after.
Yeah, there's one you created then, in which like Scrub was like pinning all the inodes, but that was like blowing up the memory.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I haven't got into that. Yeah, thanks for the nudge. I'll have a look.
Yes, and I think that in this case we can also add to the docs that the warning about MDS exceeding its cache memory limit. We can just tell the user that this warning is expected if we are going to document that.
Yeah, I think here. So I'll just go to that DR docs and I'll kind of explain. It's like here because so for the users that aren't aware, like this is one we're talking about, right? If someone has a down CephFS, like they might be clicking through and then they'll get to this one, and then sometimes the users are just like blindly running these commands, and they don't like often. Sometimes they're causing more damage than like what they need to. So if we had some kind of like simplification of this wherever possible, that's what would be great. Like, and maybe even just to start, like, is this always safe to run? Like, yes, because we're just exporting things, right? Is this one always safe to run? It's like these few at the top, like from my point of view, it's like they're basically the first 3 things are kind of like always safe to run because all you're doing is just like replaying the journal. I mean, that's like a question. Like, is there any way that you can cause damage after doing those? Like, probably not really, right? But then when you start getting down to like wiping, oh, sorry, I'll let you respond. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is, sorry, I'll just take a minute and Alex, and then you can, Alexander, and then you can speak. Yeah, these are basically written by devs for, dev reference, and these are not like, like to be run by user blindly. So I've gotten criticism on this like twice this week, and I have taken that as a high priority thing to fix it up. So yeah, expect that this page will look very different pretty soon.
Oh,
that is one
okay.
point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The other point is about you mentioning about automation. That is also being taken care of. So, if you're trying to have like a tool, super tool, whatever you can call it, like it does all this internally, does a best effort guess trying to get the file system up. Like if you go down to, right, I mean, it says you reset the session table, right? Yeah, come down. Yeah, right. It says, I mean, when do you do that is completely missing.
Exactly.
In what conditions do you do that is completely missing from the doc.
Exactly.
So, and when people go and run this, they actually cause more damage. So one, this doc will be updated. Second, that tool I'm talking about will actually do it for you, or at least it will examine your cluster and it will tell you this is what needs to be run. And maybe it will recommend that you need to run everything, or maybe it will say you don't even need to do that step because according to me, the on this metadata is totally fine. So skip this step. So that's all been worked on.
Great. I mean, great. That's really great to hear. Yeah, that's like this ones can do some damage, like from experience, like then sometimes people are doing this one. That's like that one. I had one cluster that did that one, and then it caused another problem that was there's a tracker about what happens if you do this. But then yeah, everything below, like you said, in which conditions do you run these? Like that's very that's very would be very useful for users to understand that one.
Yeah, like if you have a PG loss, you need to run these scan extents like data scan tool, because you have like metadata gone and probably some directory objects gone. So that piece of data is completely missing in this, I understand.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
So this will be refreshed pretty soon.
Excellent. That's really great news. Yeah.
Another point at this document is that it tells the user to backup the journal, but never says when the journal has to be restored from the backup and how.
True. Yeah. Yeah. How to actually use it. So let's
see.
It'll be updated. Okay, and I'll note that last thing, just the last kind of thing that Alex mentioned, which just now you said that the how to use the backed up journal. Yeah, that's also missing.
Yeah, how and when.
Yeah, how and when. Yeah. Okay, so there was another section of Cephafs, if we can move on, to tap, just get into the beginnings of, I think, because we only have 10 minutes left today. It's here, like, it's kind of like okay, disaster recovery, we've already covered that, but it's more about the Cephafs tuning and multi-MDS tuning and multi-FS versus multi-MDS, and then also balancing and ephemeral pinning. All these things are very complex for users to understand. There's a lot of knobs there that we can turn, but like some kind of it seems like there's a missing tuning and recovery tuning guide. Let's call it. This is all remove that. Yeah, and how subtree exports works. Okay, lazy IO, that's another subject. We shouldn't really talk about that. This is Chat GPT nonsense, but
yeah, I don't think so. We need to discuss lazy IO. That will come more usage. Yeah.
Yeah. So what about these things? So this, I mean, I think so. I think you know what I mean. So all of these different ways that we can optimize Cephafs performance. Do you have some? Do you have some ideas, or do you need more concrete feedback, or?
Yeah. So like Cephafs tuning is hard. I mean, I kind of agree, because when we get reports of performance issues and things like that, the first thing we ask is for perf dumps, and there's no section in the document that says what there might be document on the perf dump itself, but nothing like what if you see a bottleneck and you want to create a tracker to get help, what do you do? Right? There's nothing like that. So normally what we do is to do any kind, interpretation, right? So do any kind of tuning that has to be iterative, right? It's not like we look at a cluster and suggest go and tune this and everything works. That's really hard. That might work in some occasions, but not always. So what devs generally do when we are faced with this kind of issue is to get perf dumps from the MDS when it's experiencing bottlenecks, interval-based perf dumps, run the perf tel command on the MDS for 2 minutes or so, and gather the perf dump every 5 seconds for 2 minutes. So you have a series of perf dumps that is now referenced by devs to see how the various metrics are moving up and down. And based on that, we make an educated, we start with some guesswork, obviously, what's happening, because we cannot tell users to enable debug log. That slows down the MDS even more. So we work on perf dumps. And unfortunately, we don't have a section that explains what do users do when they experience bottlenecks and what's the procedure to resolve it. So yeah, I think so. Again, we need to improve our docs a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always happy to help with doc improvements, but I have to ask, Frankie, are those metrics currently surfaced as Prometheus metrics? Can somebody extract them from there, or without having to go and mess with the perf dumps?
I don't think so. Those go into Prometheus. If you're running the Ceph exporter and it does something magical, like collecting history, I'm not sure about that, but those are like real-time metrics that the MDS would dump once you run ceptel mds.blah buff dump.
Yeah, I think by default the bundled Prometheus scrapes every 15 seconds, but I'm not positive. I mean, we could make it scrape something differently, edit more frequently, but going too more often than that with Prometheus is usually not a good idea.
Mhm.
So 5 seconds, but probably wouldn't. If we needed a 5-second granularity, that probably wouldn't be the option. But I'm always looking to have persistent metrics rather than making somebody go mess around with the admin sockets and the perf dumps,
Yeah.
if possible.
Yeah. So go ahead, Frederick. Yeah.
Yes, that would be nice to have the metrics in the dashboard, and especially since we could also have the alert manager with specific alerts that could tell us if something goes wrong, or at least actually it could also help us understand if we need a multiple active MDS setup or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. Like when the thing that's difficult for users to understand is like normally they'll start. So there's two types of users. They'll just start with one MDS and they don't do anything. They just like assume that Ceph will be magic and do things itself, which it doesn't, right? But then there's another type that like they see all of those. Maybe they come from an HPC world or something. They see all of those different tunables like that we have, like multiple MDSs or different pinning strategies, and they kind of just like enable everything at the beginning, and without really knowing their workload. So I guess both of these point out that like it's really difficult for users to understand when a second MDS will help, or when they should be using second FS, or when they should be like, should they set the distributed random ephemeral pin to 0.0001 or 0.01? Like all of those very complex things that you have to be like a kind of super expert about. Like, I mean, I think only Patrick can answer if it should be 0.000001 or 0.
I was thinking only you could, but yeah, I certainly can't.
Like, but you see what I mean, Venki? It's like how, like what, like at first we can improve the documentation to explain, not like the documentation now explain on this stuff explains kind of like what does this parameter do, but it doesn't explain like how it works, right? It's like if we were documenting a gas pedal on a car, we're documenting what it does to the engine, but we're not explaining like, okay, use this.
Why do we
press
care?
if you want to go faster, right?
Yeah.
It's like that.
I see.
Yeah. So I think it all comes back to this like CephFS tuning guide, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Is that something that should be some kind of maybe group effort? Like should I don't want to put this right onto the developers, right? So how can we collaborate and work on a thing like that?
Okay, yeah. I mean, I would say let's start like creating a Redmine tracker and like pulling in whatever details we want, and then I'll have someone actually organize this as a talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Great. Are there any other comments on this topic? I see we have 3 minutes left.
Yeah, I can give you an update of what other one more thing that the team is doing to actually enhance the experience in CephFS and Ceph in general. So especially this is true for disaster recovery. When we are presented with a cluster which like is broken file system and things like that, I mean, what do we generally do is ask the user what's going on, right? What all commands did you run? And often it happens like the user tells us like we did this and that. And it's not like we don't trust our users, but in the whole communication channel, sometimes some flag that has been used in some command goes missing in the sense it's not communicated. And that's pretty, because we have like whole bunch of commands to operate the cluster, especially file system. So what the team is doing is to have some kind of an audit module and have these different tools, like at least the disaster recovery tools and the Ceph manager, to kind of try to have some kind of auditing. So any command that you run, at least starting with CephFS, will now go into a libceph SQLite database, and you have this whole persistent log of commands that had been run. And then you can pull out, and we don't like to ask, and we'll not like say, what did you do? We'll just say, you will have an interface, manager interface saying that, give me the last commands which were run in last month, and we will have the whole thing. So
I like that. I want to say that ZFS does that.
Oh, wow. I didn't know. Nice. Yeah. So that's on the development, but yeah, it will take, it's not yet planned which release it will hit. But yeah, that should greatly improve experience in all fronts. Like we will know exactly what command was run with what flag and when, and what was the result, right? What's the output? I mean, the command running is one thing, but did it run perfectly? And if it ran, what did it do?
So we have that's really great. Yeah, I've had the same experience. So we have the config. In Ceph we can see we have audit trail on the config already. So that's one thing that maybe we can. I don't know. It sounds like you're making this as a kind of cross component feature. It sounds like, or yeah.
It will start with CephFS, but yeah, I mean it's beneficial for the whole Ceph in general.
Exactly, because we have. I just wanted to just mention that we have an audit trail for the config changes, so we keep that in a database, and anyone can always see the config change log, so we can see that.
Yeah,
and we have like that audit. We have a file of audit trail, which is not that great. I agree. It's and probably all the offline tools are definitely not written out to that audit log file, right?
But
there is an audit channel, which just audits all the commands written.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's an audit channel, and the monitors have monitors push anything, the cluster log in the Paxa store, but the thing is they are trimmed. Those cluster, So you won't find them if you need it. Maybe.
Yeah.
So this will give you a very tighter control. Like you can set retention policies saying that anything older than a month, just throw it away, and I want just to preserve the last months of audit.
Great, good idea, because the config log history is not trimmed. There's a PR now to start trimming it. I've seen clusters with millions of entries in the config log, the config history.
Well, it's all text, so even that isn't that much data. But I love this from a support angle. I love the idea because, the user doesn't know what the last person did, and, I mean, I always run my terminals with, scroll back and log into file. Most people don't. So support angle, if I could get that in an SOS report, that would be amazing.
Exactly.
Yes,
anything
yeah,
that the CLI tools, any CLI commands that were run.
Yeah, at least, and we are taking a hard decision here to kind of any disaster recovery tools that are run in CephFS, that will never be trimmed, because we need those. We need to know actually what was done. So those will never get trimmed, and hopefully that's not run often.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're past the top of the hour. Laura, do you want to close out the meeting?
Sure. Thanks everybody for all of this valuable feedback, and we'll see you all next month. I don't know what the topic will be yet, but you'll hear updates in the Slack channel. So, and I don't think we got through everything today, so maybe we can do a part 3. I'll touch base with Dan though.
We'll see. Okay.
All right. Bye everybody.